An obscure tribal people of Mali, northwest Africa called the Dogons, isolated from the outside world for countless centuries, are guardians to sacred knowledge about the star system of Sirius, knowledge that has migrated with their highest priests from pre-dynastic Egypt earlier than 3000 BC. They spoke of highly advanced astronomical knowledge of the Sirius star system. The Dogon priests actually had maps of the star system of Sirius. Long ago, they actually said Sirius had an A star and it had a B and a C star. And both the B and the C star would revolve in an elliptical orbit around the main star every 50 years. So you would have a 50-year orbit of the B and the C star. At this point in time, we had only seen the B star. And when Robert Temple wrote his book in 1972, he didn't know anything about the evidence of actually finding the C star. So at this point, it seemed like a myth. No one really knew if these Dogon priests were accurate with modern astronomy. But in 1995, two French astronomers actually detected the existence of Sirius C. And when they did their measurements on it, they actually found that both B and C did indeed have an elliptical orbit around the star system of Sirius every 50 years, precisely as the Dogon priests had told. Also, in 1997, the same two French astronomers detected planets orbiting around the stars in Sirius B and C. So this would indicate the possibility of life, that beings could actually come from there. So if the Dogons were accurate about all this other information, and it wasn't just some sort of ancient myth, then perhaps they were even accurate about what they also knew about the very beings who came from the star system Sirius. The African Dogon tribe's priests prophesied the return of the Syrian gods and goddesses to earth, whom they call the Nomos. They say the return of the Nomos will be called the Day of the Fish, as the Syrians were known as aquatic beings, half fish and half human. If we see this African Dogon priest drawing of what ancestral knowledge says the ancient Nomos looked like, we can see the image of a spacecraft attached to a large fishtail, an image that beckons us with the profound symbology used by ancient peoples to describe the amphibious quality of these ancient beings from planets in the Sirius star system. Now, if we assume that these Syrian Nomo gods and goddesses were amphibious and had to travel all the way from Sirius, 8.7 light-years away from Earth, they would need water to encapsulate their bodies in while they were in deep space transit. Now, the mystery is unfolding. Robert Temple wrote in his book, The Sirius Mystery, published in 1976, we should not forget that if aquatic amphibious beings are making an interstellar voyage, they will need fresh water in their ship in considerable quantities. As this investigation began with NASA scientist Dr. Louis A. Frank's detection of water balls, the connection to Sirius was pointing towards water once again. Dr. Frank really believes these are balls of water balls, the size of small houses entering our Earth at a rate of 10 to 20 million impacts a year. But remember the problem that Dr. Knuth came up with. Because the water balls, there were so many of them entering our Earth's atmosphere, so many, he detected that no satellite has a chance of surviving days, let alone years, if these were actually meteors. In fact, the space shuttle, he felt should actually be struck by one of these objects. Yet he said no satellite has ever been struck by one of these objects, a fact that actually disturbed Joseph Knuth so much that he doesn't actually believe these things are water. And remember, I detected the only possible answer for that to occur would be if the water balls were going around the satellites, actually going around them, and that would detect intelligence. The ancient Dogon priests actually described the Syrians traveling in watery-like spacecraft from the star system Sirius to kind of encapsulate these half-fish, half-human gods in their transit from this star system 8.7 light-years away. Watery spacecraft, watery balls. And when we take that all the way back to Dr. Frank's discovery at NASA of water balls, these incredible water balls, so many of them, it seemed to come together. There was an amazing coincidence that I couldn't ignore. There was a distinct possibility that these water balls were actually Syrians in transit to Earth. Or even another possibility, because they were gods of water, they would be masters of water. And perhaps some of these water balls were actually their craft, but others may have actually literally been balls of water being dropped on our Earth to help heal our ozone layer. Because as I explained earlier, water eventually breaks down into hydrogen and oxygen under intense solar radiation, and therefore with the oxygen would eventually transmutate into O3, which is ozone. So could ancient Syrian gods be actually helping us heal our ozone layer? Temple further wrote that the Dogon spoke of an interstellar ship being encased in a thin metal shell probably manufactured in the solar system, which is essentially hollow, perhaps even largely empty, like a balloon, or containing water at the center, suitably insulated and heated. Temple was inadvertently describing Dr. Louis A. Frank's discovery of the mysterious water balls, which were so high in energy they evaded detection on infrared satellites, probably because they were encased with a radiant barrier, Temple's thin metal shell, to protect them from the intense radiation from the sun and other cosmic rays. But Dr. Frank made his first discovery in 1985, unpublished at the time, and Temple wrote and published his book, The Sirius Mystery, in 1976, 9 years earlier. In fact, he never even wrote about or learned of Dr. Frank's water comet mystery. We should not forget the Dogon priests say the Nomos will return, and when they do, it will be called the Day of the Fish. The first indication of their return, say the Dogon, will be that a new star will appear in the sky, the star of the 10th moon. Could the new stars of the 10th moon be the same as the enormous 2 to 3 mile wide UFO seen on the NASA STS-75 mission in 1996? The Dogon priests also say that the elements which are at the moment retracted inside the body will re-emerge. Then the Nomos will re-emerge. Then the Nomos will land on the earth again in their ark, the landing craft. From this ark will emerge the mythical ancestors, namely the very same personalities who figure in all the myths. So there will presumably be political implications to their arrival. After their return, this group of Nomos will rule from the waters as they are masters of water. "7,000 years ago, in Babylonian mythology, there was a god named A, later called Oanes by the Greeks, who suddenly emerged from the ocean. A was a water god. He was depicted with the upper body of a man and the lower body of a fish. According to ancient peoples, he taught architecture, math, astronomy, and early sciences to help humankind come out of the dark ages and enter civilization. Oanes' fish-tailed feminine counterpart, the moon goddess Atargates, was the earliest mermaid deity. She was the predecessor of the Greek love goddess Aphrodite, and water was their primordial element.
Colombia and the satellite now just passing over the west coast of northern Africa.
The home of the Dogon tribe, who prophesied the return of the Syrian gods and goddesses, the Nomos, was in Mali, northwest Africa. Was it a coincidence that the shuttle was passing directly over northwest Africa, their precise location during the astounding incident when the tethered satellite was swarmed by UFOs with the signature of the star system of Sirius written all over them? But as the Dogon priests were keepers of this ancient knowledge from pre-dynastic Egypt around 3000 BC, and the shuttle would be passing directly over Egypt within a few moments, it appeared as yet another coincidence beyond reason. We had to look at what the Egyptians knew about the star system of Sirius. Because the Dogon tribe migrated to northwest Africa originally from Egypt in 3000 BC, we would have to look at what the ancient Egyptians knew about the star system of Sirius, and the great gods and goddesses who came to Earth thousands of years ago and brought humankind from primitive life to modern civilization. Because today we may have an indication that they have returned, perhaps to bring us to yet a higher level of civilization. In Robert Temple's book, The Sirius Mystery, we learn of the Syrian water god connection to ancient Egypt, from the ancient Greek father of history, Herodotus, who studied in Egypt during his life in the 5th century BC. Herodotus details an amazing connection to Sirius and water when he recounts how the ancient Egyptians channeled large amounts of water through canals from the Nile River, called Sirius in ancient times, to the many sacred temples, sites, and the pyramids themselves. The ancient kings had their own burial chambers filled with water to emulate their gods and goddesses' likeness to water. Even Khephren pyramid had a passage bringing water in from the Nile, which encircled it like an island, in which the ancients said the great Cheops lies, symbolizing the ancient god of Egypt as an amphibian. Herodotus described how the incredible maze of canals and passages bringing water to so many of the sacred temples and shrines, even the pyramids themselves, was a sight that he felt surpassed even the pyramids themselves. The great Egyptian goddess Isis, the wife of the chief of the Egyptian god Osiris, symbolized as the all-seeing eye, was herself also symbolized as an all-seeing eye with a throne. Osiris was said by one of Aristotle's companions who visited Egypt, heard of an ancient myth that Osiris could not walk because his legs were grown together. Does this tell us once again that he too was an amphibian from the star system of Sirius? Known to the ancient Egyptians as the star system Sirius herself, Isis tells that, "I am she who goes out to the dog star." Because she is the wife of Osiris, they must both be the same kind of beings, and they must both be from the same star system of Sirius. Isis spoke of her travels to the star system of Sirius, so how did she travel there? Was she actually just visiting Earth from Sirius? Did she travel to Earth from Sirius in a spacecraft? Being a goddess of water, would she travel between Earth and Sirius in a watery spacecraft, just as the Dogons told? Both the Dogon and Isis called Sirius the dog star and symbolized it as a dog. But why? Perhaps it was because the great Egyptian god Anubis, symbolized as a half-man, half-dog god, was said to be the god of the star system Sirius by the ancient Egyptians. Anubis was also known as the god of the dead, who would guide the pharaohs and the spiritually adept of ancient Egypt upon their death in a celestial boat to their heavens in the star system of Sirius. The mystery as to what caused the water erosion around the Sphinx has baffled archaeologists since its discovery. The water erosion markings were much too high on the Sphinx to suggest that the Nile River had ever flooded that high. But Herodotus accounts of channeling water to fill small lakes that encompass the shrines of their Syrian gods and goddesses. Could the ancient Egyptians have built these giant water receptacles to make a place to stay for their half-human, half-amphibian gods and goddesses as they would visit them from the star system of Sirius? The mystery of the Sphinx revealed itself to Robert Temple as a half-dog, half-human, instead of the half-human, half-lion pervading theory. Temple argues that the body of the Sphinx is too long in its torso to be a body of a lion, as lions have rather short torsos, whereas dogs have very long ones. So Temple felt that the body of the Sphinx was a dog, as an emulation of the Syrian god Anubis, symbolizing what the Dogon tribe called the dog star, Sirius. But once again, Temple extracts from the Greek historian Herodotus that the body of the Sphinx was originally lying in a man-made lake surrounded by water, explaining the mystery as to why the Sphinx was so eroded by water at such a high level. This also demonstrated that Anubis was a god of the waters. As the great gods of Sirius living in Egypt were masters of water and presumably knew how to manipulate the waters, could they send and direct balls of water from deep space and bring rain in large quantities, and transform the arid deserts into a thriving oasis with rich agriculture? It was written that Egypt in ancient times had a rich and thriving agriculture. Could these ancient masters of water have turned a desert into an oasis because they had such power over the waters? We are reminded of the many great miracles of mastery over water, when Moses had God part the Red Sea, when God caused the great flood in the time of Noah, and warned him of the flood well in advance of its arrival. Could this be because Noah's God had mastery over water, and he knew the flood was coming because God just had to send huge amounts of water in from deep space and have it rain down on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights? We are also reminded of the many miracles of Jesus Christ, where he walked on the water and turned the sea into wine, and he commanded the sea to a calm when his disciples feared that the severest ocean storm would claim their lives, once again showing mastery over water. Robert Temple also wrote in his book, The Sirius Mystery, that the Dogons actually believed that Jesus too was in Nomo from the star system of Sirius, and therefore a god who had mastery over the waters. The great masters of water could also direct and send giant balls of water down onto our Earth's atmosphere, guiding them around satellites and the shuttle to prevent collisions, and the water would eventually transform under solar radiation into hydrogen and oxygen, and the oxygen would transmutate into ozone, yet another benevolent act by the ancient goddesses and gods to help heal our failing ozone layer. Former science advisor to Walter Cronkite, Richard Hoagland, a profound space researcher, discovered that on May 27, 1999, NASA launched Space Shuttle mission number STS-96 at 6:50 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 3 years after the STS-75 tether incident, with the star system of Sirius at 33.33 degrees from the horizon at the launch site in Cape Canaveral, Florida. But why was Sirius at precisely 33.33 degrees during this launch, the highest symbol of enlightenment in Masonic wisdom? Because all of the founding fathers of the Constitution of the United States of America were highest degree Masons, and that the Washington monuments were all designed in the order of perfect architecture and masonry, this was no coincidence. Even the United States $1 bill, seen with the pyramid with an eye hovering above it, was a symbol used by the ancient Egyptians for their chief god, Osiris, the husband to Isis, the gods of the Sirius star system. Were the highest powers at NASA using symbology to tell the star system of Sirius that they had understood just who our visitors are, and that we have received their message, and we were sending a reply that said, yes, we understand who you are, and that you have returned?